Commissioner Gold,
I'm here.
Commissioner Jameson,
Here.
Commissioner Peterson,
Here.
Commissioner Rodriguez,
Present.
Chair Williams.
Here. Let's stand for the pledge, please.
Right hand over your heart. Again. I pledge
Does anybody wish to make any changes to the order of the agenda? See none. Moving on. We'll open the meeting for public comment on items not on the agenda, but on the consent agenda. Do we have anybody that would like to speak in public comment? Nobody in-house? Anybody online? I don't see any hands up. Moving to item 3, consent items. You want to pull anything that changes to the minutes or the current projects list?
Nothing, and I'll move approval of the minutes from November 7th.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? None? Passes 5-0.
I'll also move approval of the Planning and Building Division current projects.
So that was part of the consent.
I thought we did them separately, that's fine.
Okay.
So both.
I think you only approve the meeting minutes, so generally
Okay.
with consent, you do them both at the same time, but since you just did the minutes, maybe we should also do the,
I'll move
Okay.
approval of the Planning and Building Division current project.
I'll second it.
Moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None? Passes 5-0. Any ex parte communications that anybody would like to report?
Not working on the TV.
No.
Can we get on the computer and go back there?
if you're online, could you please mute yourself? Thank you.
No public hearings tonight. Discussion items. There's just one, item 6A. Could we have a staff report on that, please?
I have one moment, please. I may have to recuse myself. So is Chelsea there somewhere that we? Chelsea, I am a neighbor to the 2 properties along Alamo Pintado. I'm within 500 feet. May I just sit in the back of the room, or do I have to leave the room?
Thank you for the question, and good evening, everyone. If you decide that you need to recuse yourself based on the proximity of your property to a property at issue tonight, you would need to leave the room.
Okay, is it mandatory that you're within 500 feet?
Yes.
Okay,
Well, respectfully, we're not voting on anything this evening, correct? This is more of a conversation.
That's correct. That's correct. But if she decides that she wants to recuse herself based on that, then that's her decision. But the rule is that it's FPPC conflict if you have a property within 500 feet of a project at issue. I would say that since this is the housing element and it's generally applicable and we're not making a decision tonight, there is you could argue that that's not at it, not a conflict, but Councilmember Jameson, that is, Planning Commissioner Jameson, that is your ultimate decision to make tonight. And if you do decide to recuse yourself on those grounds, then you would need to leave the room.
do I just have to leave the room for that one item?
Yes, and then you can come back when we're done.
Okay,
It's the only item on the agenda.
so which item are we going to hear first?
There's only one.
You can go have dinner.
Okay.
So I will say we picked a real doozy for your last meeting, so thanks, everybody. And thank you for your service on the Planning Commission. So we provided many elements to you at your meeting in November to prepare you for a discussion about the general plan. And in the staff report that we prepared for this meeting, we're asking for general comment on the general plan with an emphasis on the housing element. Any questions?
Not yet. No questions from anybody?
Does anybody have general comments about the housing element?
I have a general comment. I sit on the GPAC as Joni Jameson does, and I said this at the last meeting, I've said it at the GPAC meeting, I'm saying it again tonight because there's more people here. We are so cart before the horse in this endeavor, and it's current staff's not at fault. City council is not at fault. We got way behind the eight ball without having a permanent planning director, with having a city manager who was in charge of this process, and we hired the consultants. As everyone knows, either out in Zoom land or in the audience, we had a recall election. We had an election 2 years ago. We had a new election now. It's been in real flux, and it doesn't matter because we're supposed to review this, and 8 years has come and gone, and some folks in the audience are on the GPAC that have sat with me, and we've had this discussion. Mr. Lansing Duncan and I have had this discussion many times trying to figure out where we're at. And now, because of a timeline from the state of this February deadline, we're supposed to come up with our housing element and be able to send it to City Council and be able to send it on to the state to be certified for CEQA. And the other elements do not have that same gun to our head, if you will. This one does. So, as an example, there's 7 elements in a general plan. We have more. We have a design element also. The design element has not gone to the design review committee yet. This has not come to us until tonight, even though Ms. Jameson and myself have had previous experience with it because we both sat on GPAC. The last meeting that we had at GPAC, we actually started and got through some elements and got to the sites and ended up running out of time and said, are you serious? This is where we're at. We've got to get something done this quick, this much in a hurry. My understanding is, and it's a general statement, and City Council can correct me, is that if we don't get a certified housing element through the right steps, that the city, or the state can or will withhold grants that the city could be entitled to. I don't know if we've gotten any grants. I don't know what's at risk, but certainly we need to take a breath. We need to figure this out. It's a very, very hot topic. We've had the numbers of RHNA housing numbers went from 80 to 90 to 112 or 116 in the last month or so. So it's a moving target. So I say all that, not that I don't want to hear all the comments tonight, but believe me, on GPAC, there's 15 of us or 12 or 17 of us that sit and have been hashing this through over the last 6 months, 8 months, and we are way behind the 8 ball. So for anyone to believe that tonight any action is going to be taken, it's not an action item. To pick sites tonight, it's not going to happen tonight. But sure, welcome all the comments, and all those comments were, a lot of the comments, we got these tonight, and I'm reading through them, and I've seen those because Mr. Duncan presented many of these arguments to us at our GPAC meeting, and they're all obviously well thought out and well read. So I'm just saying that trying to emphasize the fact that it's no one's fault at city staff level, certainly not at city council level. Planning Commission got it tonight, and certainly not at GPAC, who we've been just scrambling to get through this with this hanging over our heads of this February deadline that we have to get something to the state. I'm a believer, and city council, our city attorney can say that I'm wrong, that a good faith effort goes a long way with the state. In a lot of these state mandated regulations that come out, and we're trying to make a good faith effort here, and we're going to keep moving ahead. So that's what this meeting, as I see it, is tonight, to hear comments from us, hear comments from you folks, and anyone else there in Zoom land, and have another, hopefully, GPAC meeting here. I don't think we have any scheduled till after the first of the year,
We have one scheduled for December 14th.
December 14th, and then we have city, well, that's the design review.
So I took a few notes based off of what you said. So thank you for everything that you said. One thing is that Roger and I, we spoke today about investigating with the state about the February 15th deadline. Our understanding is that it's pretty crucial to submit your draft element to be able to get comments back from the state. So why we were pushing the timeline we were was because we didn't want to meet that, knowing that we weren't going to meet, I think there's like a 4-month grace period, knowing that we weren't going to meet that final deadline for an approved housing element. So we wanted to at least meet that. However, we've been thinking a lot about the change in council, about the change in our commissions and our committees, and whether it would be a detrimental impact not to, or to try to push forward and meet that, knowing that none of those bodies are meeting in January except for the city council. So we're investigating that. Unfortunately, the California Department of Housing and Community Development website was down today, so I wasn't able to do that research prior to this meeting, but we are having that conversation about what the timeline the next few months look like. Then the other thing, to your point about the impact of housing element, there's 3. One is that, yes, we can't apply for any grants where you have to have a certified housing element. One of my goals was to apply for more funding to support our efforts, particularly those outlined in the policy section of the general plan. However, if that's a consequence of not submitting it, there's not much we can do. The other one is there's a deadline for rezoning. By meeting all the deadlines, you have a 3-year window where you can rezone. If you don't meet those, you have a 1-year deadline. We're not as concerned about that because part of the effort through this general plan is to rezone the lots. So we're not as concerned about that. And then the other one, y'all may have heard about it in the news, is this builder's remedy, which basically allows for ministerial review of certain projects where I think it's 20% like low income units. If a developer is proposing those, they just move through they just get approved basically and don't have to go through a discretionary process. And I know a lot of communities in Southern California are getting hit with that really hard because they don't have certified housing elements by the deadline. And then to your point, this is not an action item tonight. We're taking comments to put all together to give to our consultants.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
On the developer remedy, that would apply even if a piece of property is not rezoned for housing, or from single family to multi, or from commercial to multi, or recreational to multi.
I am not sure about the intricacies of it. I know Lori's online, so maybe she does.
Yes, okay.
Yes.
I'm sorry, could you ask that question again?
The question is that with the developer's remedy of coming in and over the counter basically getting approval for a project, does that include a rezone? Or is it that's already zoned multifamily, and therefore I just want to get my ministerial over the counter plans approved quicker? It would seem like the zoning element needs to be addressed, which we haven't gotten to also in our GPAC review.
So there's 2 possibilities for developer's remedy. One of them is to be focused on the properties that are zoned for residential, whether it's single family all the way up to DR20. But again, there's an affordability component that would have to be part of that commitment. There's also the new state law that talks about doing affordable housing within commercially zoned properties that are underutilized or vacant, those can also be part of the developer's remedy. So you're basically looking at commercial and residential as a possibility for someone to move forward with a project without discretionary view, as long as they meet the provisions provided in state law, which the most onerous one would be the amount of affordable component that would be in the project. And I do want to add one other point. I heard at another housing presentation just recently that out of the 197 jurisdictions in the state of California, 191 of them will be late with their housing element. So just so you understand that the whole state is under a whole lot of pressure in this, I'm going to say, arbitrary deadline that's been set.
Thank you. I have a question. You talked about the grants. If this is submitted late, and it's only the draft that we're talking about.
We cannot hear the planning commissioners.
Oh, your mic, I'm sorry.
I'm asking a question about the grants. And if we're late with the draft copy, you said that we couldn't apply for grants. Is that forever?
No, it's just until we have a certified housing element.
Okay, so
Yeah.
once it's certified, we could still?
Yes.
Okay.
And can you answer a question of, if it was a perfect world, when would this get certified? Isn't it next winter?
So that's what we've been discussing. So due to the fact that we need to initiate the environmental impact report, the EIR, and our consultants are estimating that'll take anywhere from 5 to 9 months. And we cannot authorize that work to move forward until we're done editing the elements. So the way that we had scheduled the timeline is probably the initiation happening in February. This was prior to these conversations today, but initiating the EIR in February, and then that taking 5 to 9 months, which would take us into late in the year. So we're gonna be late anyway. That's the convo that we've been having.
I have a question about the grants also, is how frequently, I don't know if you know this, but how frequently does the city request the grants or utilize grants, and is it really something that's gonna be detrimental to the city as a whole?
I know, so I haven't applied for grants since I started, but there were 3 that were applied for before I started, and they're particular to the general plan. I think we have at least 1 or 2 others, so I don't think that there's a frequency, just due to the fact that we are a really small and scrappy team. But I have 10 years of history applying for Continuum of Care program funding, so that's something that I was wanting to do to help support our efforts, particularly around affordability.
And just in a much more general comment, you mentioned editing. In going through this whole document, there is a lot of editing that needs to be done. There's redundant statements in there, the chapters, I think there's 2 chapter 10s and 2 chapter 5s. And is that something that is built into the process, or when is that going to happen? 'Cause I found it very disconcerting. There doesn't seem to be a standard template for how the data and information is presented.
So staff has been providing comments on items that we find to be redundant. And I know we've also identified misspellings and such. But the more eyes, the better, because as you all have seen, it's a very lengthy document.
Okay, any other comments? If not, we'll take it out for public comment. I have several speaker slips. We'll limit the speakers to 3 minutes since we have so many. The first one up is Samuel Burke.
Yeah, I didn't realize I was going to be the first speaker. Anyway, my name is Sam Burke. I'm a resident of Mission Oaks. And I'm going to be speaking on foundation approaches for the sites 3 and 4 and what we have to deal with to put structures on these areas. The problem is the soils in these in site 3 is it's Diablo clay. It's what they call like extremely expansive. In the wintertime it absorbs moisture and expands, and in the summertime it contracts and pulls away from if you had a foundation. Then the foundation just kind of moves around, and the house, the walls crack and the ceiling crack, and it's a real problem. There are ways to mitigate this foundations in this kind of a soil condition, and one approach is to what they call over-excavate. In other words, you dig out material in the area of where you're going to put the structure, and you replace it with material that is non-expansive, like decomposed granite. Okay, in other words, you dig out the clay material down to a certain depth. I've heard some say 30 to 60 feet, and then you replace it with decomposed granite, and then you build your structure on the decomposed granite. And that's one approach. That's pretty expensive, and it requires a lot of truckloads of material and bulldozers and cranes. And the second approach is to have the foundation sit on piers, like if you've been to Isla Vista on the beach and looked up at these houses that are kind of falling off the cliff, you'll notice that they're all suspended. They're mounted on pillars that are made with the 2 feet diameter concrete columns, and as the ocean pounds away at the cliffs, there's nothing but the houses sitting on these columns that go down to the beach, and eventually the whole thing falls off, and people have been killed from just falling off of the balcony of these homes. Let's see. Anyway, is that it?
Thank you.
Okay.
Next speaker, Stephen Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, members of the commission. I'm a resident. My name is Stephen Martin, and my wife, Mary Vaughn, and I are residents of 698 Hillside Drive, and that's in the Mission Oaks subdivision here in Solvang. Aside from the schedule and the complications of the schedule, I think most of us are most concerned with the impact this proposal is going to have, and if we have detrimental effects on our neighborhood, we want to be sure that we actually make it affordable housing. And I think that there's a real probability that the consulting report has really not gone into depth enough to make us fully confident that the housing that is going to go into a place where we've zoned it for DR20 and we've designated it as low-income housing is actually going to be low-income housing. Ultimately, whether it's built or not, is going to be up to whether the cost of the development and the price that the developer gets for the dwellings gives the developer sufficient profit. So it seems that very important for the planning commission and the consultant to be looking very carefully at the underlying feasibility of building affordable housing on these sites and the cost of doing that and the cost of remediation for the various concerns will be extremely important. We can be wishful thinkers and rezone and designate land that's open as affordable housing, low and very low income housing, but that doesn't mean it's going to get built. And if it doesn't get built, we have obviously severe consequences. I think it's very important that the Planning Commission and the consultants, we don't think the consultants have gone into some of this very carefully, that you look at the issues, which some of which have been expressed already tonight, but you look at the issues of traffic, safety, soil composition, compaction, flooding, erosion, various infrastructure improvements that will have to be made due to the water issue and due to the traffic issues, and determine what costs there's going to be for the various remediation effects. If that cost on a particular property, like the higher elevation parcel of Site 3, is just going to have very severe increased costs. We ask you to consider the Site 3 in 2 parcels. It is already 2 parcels. Site 1 is more amenable to low-income housing. The higher elevation one is not. We also ask you to take, okay, I'd like to just submit my comments so you can review it at your leisure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Elaine Morris.
Jonathan? Okay.
Go ahead.
My name is Elaine Morris. I live in Mission Oaks. In the last year, we learned that the city of Solvang is considering rezoning our area to allow for more dense building and population in order to meet its promise to the state to increase affordable housing. While this is an objective that we all share, we also believe that Solvang's plan to meet this goal has not been given sufficient study. Site 3 is not suitable for high-density housing for many reasons, and I question whether the council or its consultants has thoroughly considered all the factors necessary to make a sound decision that serves all of the city's residents. For example, the Alamo Pintado 246 intersection and its surrounding commercial areas are already heavily trafficked. Parking on Old Mission Road has steadily increased as a result of the expansion of the New Frontiers Marketplace. A major construction project would be required to widen that road. The 4-way stop sign at Old Mission and Alamo Pintado is often ignored, and if you have been there, you know. I daily hear the sound of tires coming to a screeching halt, horns blaring at each other. There are multiple lanes of traffic that converge on this intersection, and many of the drivers just do not obey the stop signs. During heavy times during times of heavy traffic, conditions are really hazardous for the drivers as well as for the pedestrians. Many large trucks also are delivering goods in this area, and they block the roads and further limit access to shops and homes. A rezoning to allow for building additional dwellings in this area will only worsen the traffic and the congestion, and thereby increase the possibility of accidents. A major road redesign of this area would be required, and the cost to taxpayers would make it more difficult to justify the building multiple new homes here. Approval has already been given to Sansom to build a medical clinic on the other side of the road, and the effect that this will have on the traffic should be taken into consideration. I've lived in Mission Oaks for 15 years. I've been here for 25. One of our home's main attractions is the view to the east and the south, and indeed that is identified as a scenic vista in the City of Solvang community design element. And while I would love to keep the wonderful view that I have, I understand that some building may be inevitable, some has already occurred. but any large-scale property development would involve years of grading, noise, dust, and require a major unwelcome lifestyle adjustment for the city residents on the neighboring properties. Policy 7E of the community design element recognizes the need to, quote, minimize adverse visual impacts of development on sites with high visibility, such as hillsides or in the highway corridors. This site is located on a highly visible and a hillside and a highway corridor. Obviously, the most direct way to mitigate these impacts is to reduce the extensive redevelopment proposed for this site. Many of us are longtime residents of Solvang who have for years supported, and I thank you, and if you would like copies of.
Thank you. Dan Martin? Go ahead, Dan.
Okay, thank you. My name is Dan Martin. I'm a lifelong resident of the San Ynez Valley and a longtime resident of Solvang. I'm also the president of the Mission Oaks Owners Association. And you're going to be finding that right, Sophie? Yeah. Thank you very much. Mission Oaks has provided you with a very detailed letter regarding the proposed rezoning of Site 3, which lies between Alamo Pintado Road and Mission Oaks. Mission Oaks residents know these two parcels far better than the consultants who claim the larger, steeper parcel is suitable for building affordable units at the low and very low income levels. This analysis does not reflect the realities of the site, which will be very expensive to develop, requiring the units to be sold at above moderate market rate prices. Our letter documents the many issues that will add to that cost: steep slopes requiring excessive grading, retaining walls and erosion control, and existed eroded drainage, expansive Diablo soil requiring excavation and importation of non-expansive material, the need for extensive on-site drainage structures such as a retention basin, and preservation and protection of the historic Mission Aqueduct. Like other Solvang residents, we know that traffic and water are the city's largest problems. And considering these problems, why would the city want to create more units than necessary, as Table H58 Sites Inventory on page 186 of your packet indicates? Traffic is already a problem at Highway 246 and Alamo Pintado Road, and also at Alamo Pintado on Old Mission Drive, which includes traffic from both Nilsson's and Mercantile shopping centers. Mission Oaks residents experience this congestion every day, and also at the Viborg and Alamo Pintado intersection if they're going to the hospital or doctor's offices. If the city needs to produce low and very low income housing, the steeper of the two Site 3 parcels is not a good location. We encourage the city to consider these two parcels separately and look at other flatter sites, including vacant city property, in order to produce a realistic and achievable housing unit. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Wendy Gregerson?
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. I'm Wendy Gregerson. I reside in Mission Oaks with my husband, Hans. And I think that Dan actually stole my notes, so I won't be very long. I only had a couple of things, and I'd just like to reiterate them because they are very important to us. And first of all, I want to say we understand all the hard work that's gone in, and we appreciate everything that you've done, and we hope to continue to work with you to make this work perfect. One of the concerns that we have is we think the proposal lacks an understanding, as we've talked about, of the areas, especially as it pertains to Site 3, which is where we all live and love. And as such, it doesn't we don't feel that it establishes a firm basis that'll guarantee the city can meet its low-income housing mandate in any sustainable way. And that's really an important element, because if we cannot do that, then all of a sudden, in a few years out, when everybody's looking for, the state is looking for more low-income housing, and we will have used up some of the property that we could have used, and we'll also be getting a lot of penalties for not meeting the original mandates. So we think that we need to be very cautious when we're looking at what the property can really accomplish, and as I said before, how much it's going to cost. I will reiterate what Dan said, is we also have the two properties. They are so different that you'd really have to study very carefully what you actually could achieve in either of them. Some may be more amenable to low-income housing, but others will not be. And the last thing I would like to say is, the capacity that you see in the study is calling for 131 units. That is more than the state has asked for. And I think Solvang should not give away or plan away in advance any land that we may need in the future for this kind of housing. I agree with and would support Dan in the complications of traffic and congestion. We see this every day. It is horrific. It's horrific now going just through Solvang, and yet Solvang is covered everywhere now by traffic jams and people going through housing areas, and we don't have solutions for that. So one of the things maybe Solvang could consider doing is going through an intense traffic survey and sort of start to look at, if this is going to continue to grow and our tourism is going to continue to grow, what are our options for resolving that? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Karen Waite?
Good evening, Commissioners. Karen Waite, resident, Hillside Drive, 748, Mission Oaks, former city council member. I know that you all are up against a deadline. That actually is not something that worries me at this point, because we have a job to do and have a job to do and have it to get it done correctly, which I really hope that happens. I agree with absolutely everything anyone before me has said regarding the appropriateness of the proposed development of this site. I do think that it warrants further archaeological study, environmental study, and geological study. Something that keeps getting pushed under the rug here that I really want to hammer out is the archaeological significance of this area. It is a sensitive area. It is listed as a sensitive area. I am also particularly concerned with some of the less than impressive reporting with mistakes and whatnot. So I think that needs to be examined. And with that, I do have a handout. I am an owner of this property. There was a handout that we received showing a 60-foot easement going through my property. We don't have any legal records or description of this easement. This is merely something that was done by the proposed developer. So I'm going to hand that out to you, so that I think that should go in the packet to be looked at. But I really do hope that as this study goes along, you listen very carefully to the residents and how this will affect everyone's quality of life in that area. And when people talk about what they want to see at the gateway to Solvang, well, we're just about as close to the gateway as you can get. The sign's right there across the street. It says, "Welcome to Solvang." So anyway, thank you for your time, and thank you for the hard work that you're doing. And I'd like to hand these out to you.
Thank you, Karen. Lansing Duncan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. My name is Lansing Duncan, and like some of you up there, I was actually very surprised that this meeting was occurring at this time to consider this issue. Those of us who had previously followed what was happening with the housing element update and attended the March and May workshops were told this meeting was going to happen this summer. And now all of a sudden, Mincher Harnish sends us on Saturday a notice that we're having this meeting here tonight. So I'm glad you guys recognize that there is sort of a schedule and a process problem, and that you can take the time to do this right. You know, although there are a lot of people saying rush, 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 let's do this right. So I just want to cover some real factual things, and I think they're important. Numerous past revisions to the housing element have studied these parcels and decided they were only suitable for above moderate income housing. Every time. Okay. You've heard about the existing drainage flow, the permeability problems, the soil, all the things that are going to add up to the expense of developing this site. One thing you're probably going to need is a retention basin. If you try and build a retention basin to deal with all the housing that would be on the upper site and the impermeable surfaces, it's going to have to be on the lower site, and that will take away the room that there would be for affordable housing on that part of it. No, actually, not yet. An earlier version of the draft you've seen has a comment, and it is actually from a city staffer. And it's speaking about the 45 very low and 45 low units that were assigned to the Site 3 in the consultant's draft. Quote, "The city does not agree with listing this whole project as very low and low. This should be at the most 20 units in the low category, with the rest at market rate. This is a challenging site to develop, and it would be very difficult to fund a 100% low-income project." This comment from city staff familiar with the site as compared to the out-of-town consultants is an admission that only the 1 acre flatter parcel could be developed at a density of 20 units per acre to produce relatively affordable units. That should tell you right there, before you consider all the other stuffs and the impact to the community, that the upper steeper parcel should not be included in Site 3. And then you saw before the picture that showed the hill. If you could pull that back up, it's even more complex than that, because it's not just like this, it's also like this when you look at the site in another section, because of how steep it is on Alamo Pintado and how steep it is on our side. So I do hope you've had a chance to look at my letter, because there are a lot more points made in it that I didn't have an opportunity to make this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Phyllis Martina?
Hello. I'm Phyllis Martina. I'm a resident of Mission Oaks, and I'm speaking in favor of all my fellow neighbors that have spoken before, as well as my neighbors across Alamo Pintado and up the street. Of course, everybody wants to maintain their quality of life. I urge you to consider other properties that could be developed, all within the budgetary requirements that would require low-income housing. And lastly, I just want to wish you all happy holidays. Thank you.
Thank you. That was the last speaker slip I have. Is there anybody else here that would like to speak? Please state your name.
I will. Ron Frank. I'm also a resident of, am I speaking out of line?
Yeah.
Hold on, we're taking comments from other people in the room, and then we'll open up to Zoom. Thank you.
My name is Charles Chester, and I live in Mission Oaks, former resident of Village Collection over here. And when I moved in, there was Lot 72 set aside over there, and nothing has happened to Lot 72. I don't know what the status of that is, but it's flat, and it's would be a possibility for continuing low-cost housing. I hope you, wish you a happy holiday as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else here who would like to speak? Come forward.
Do I have to push a button or anything?
Nope.
Thank you.
Just state your name.
John Moison, resident of Mission Oaks. And I'm just getting caught up on all the facts and the details about this situation. I just want to reiterate some of the issues with the upper parcel and some of the things that are going on in our own soil that we built homes, the original developer, that we recently just got an association assessment because of specifically the soil. We've had to repair some homes there. And I can see the lower parcel. There's some desire to build something there. The 3 other corners in that area have been built commercial. And I'm a cyclist, as I've been riding around town and seeing what other areas and how they're developed, particularly Buellton, multi-use, low income. So I'd like to maybe, at least visually, to take that into account. When you've got 3 corners there that are commercial, and then suddenly you've got perhaps this 3-story low income building, the consistency just doesn't feel right about possibly using that 1 acre parcel. Maybe it is multi-use. I mean, that area is really, you've got restaurants, you've got supermarkets, you've got UPS stores. So it is an area where we do our business. So maybe we can consider that parcel to be not only low income, maybe upstairs or the 3rd floor, but also commercial, because there's also the issue of lease, commercial lease. I don't know if that's part of the plan that we need to meet too. But businesses are leaving, Los Olivos and other areas because they just can't afford to do business here. So, those are just some of my thoughts. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing none, we'll take it out to Zoom. I see one hand up. Can't read the name, though.
It's Mark Frank.
Yes, I'm Mark Frank. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, my wife and I bought our house last year, and we are at 653 Hillside Drive. And we hope that you support all of the other homeowners that have all the same concerns we have. So, please preserve our quality of life. Thank you.
Thank you. Who's the next one over?
Paul Matthews.
Go ahead, Paul.
Thank you. My wife and I have lived here in the valley for 47 years and here in Mission Oaks for a little over 9 years. And we love this community up here, the environment, and our neighbors. And I won't waste your time bringing up any other issues, but I fully support what has been said by our neighbors and our board of directors. And we are in full support of their position. Thank you very much, and happy holiday.
Thank you, Paul. Anyone else online?
Not there. Jenny's not there.
I don't see any other hands up. Anybody like to speak online that hasn't spoken? Apparently not. So we'll bring it back to the commission for discussion.
Could I start? I just have a couple quick questions.
Sure.
Aaron, you sit on the GPAC. And as far as these sites being developed, it doesn't sound like there's a developer wanting to do something right now. It's just they're setting this up so that it can be developed in this fashion, correct?
Yeah, what is required to be certified is that there's allowable numbers that could be developed. That doesn't mean it has to be developed. As an example, last time we did this, I was on planning commission then, 10 years ago, whenever that was. And we rezoned, as an example, behind Denmarket Square. Ken Hunter is developing 13 units right there now. That's been in the making. The previous owner allowed it to be rezoned because we asked them. Ken Hunter also bought a piece of property in Alamo Pintado. That's now gotten rezoned. We rezoned that to meet our RENA numbers, and he's now breaking ground maybe in the next year on 32 units there also. The Skit Lumberyard, which at St. George now is developing, that was zoned TRC. We rezoned that to multifamily. Of course, that gentleman came forward with this big development, and everybody went, we can't do that, we don't want to see that, and now he's come back with, okay, what do you all want to see? A mixed use of hotel and residential. These have all been in the last 7 to 10 years, so we met our RENA numbers with that. It doesn't. So answering your question a long way, we've done this many times, as most communities have, and you try to pick the sites. We're running out of sites. Those other sites seem to work okay, but that doesn't mean they're going to ever get developed. Maybe the Skit Mesa or Skit Lumberyard never gets developed, or Ken Hunter yanks his off of Alamo Pintado there. So you're correct. We don't have to have a developer. We don't need a developer. We would have to go to the owner of any property, as an example. What these folks have talked about, the Richmond family owns that property. You'd have to ask them, do you want to be rezoned? If they said no, what are we going to do, a taking? I mean, we're not going to do a taking. Another site is owned by the Jackson family at the bottom of Alisal Hill, across from the golf course. Do they want it rezoned to multifamily? If not, are we going to go to battle with the Jackson family over a lawsuit? I can't imagine. Lot 72 is in a lease right now, answering one gentleman's question earlier. Lot 72 is owned by the city. It was part of the development of whatever the development is over here. I'm so sorry. A Village Collection. And that then land got put, it's now in a long-term lease with the Santa Barbara Trust for Historic Preservation. It's a 99-year lease to hold. And if we were looking at rezoning that right now, everybody from Village Collection would be here also. We looked at all those sites 8-10 years ago, picked a few of them, met our RENA needs, and here we are again, and we're going to be here again in 8 years or 3 years or 5 years. It's a constant drag, and I say this over and over, and some of us realize it. We are, as a planning commission, when it comes to zoning, at the whim of the state more than ever before, and it's going to get, some say better, some say worse, as years go on, because they demand us to do things. The ADU, accessory dwelling unit ordinances that we've all passed in every city, in every county across the state, was mandated by the state, basically triplexing every single lot in the city of Santa Barbara County and San Luis County, the whole state. You can put an ADU, you can put a minor ADU, you can convert a garage, not build a garage. That's all been mandated by the state. And here we sit. So us little cities or large cities are facing this continuously, and it's coming at us. I don't have an answer for it, but that's, we're trying to pick and choose or be out of sync with the state and see what happens. I don't know.
And I always feel like a broken record, but I always talk about the TRC, and a lot of the residents here also mention mixed use, and I'm always a proponent of that. Like they did at New Frontiers above there. There's housing above that, which is, they put apartments in there, and that should go towards RENA numbers. So what about? Can't we just add something to this plan that says, hey?
In answering that,
yeah, and I know
GPAC,
that's small.
No, we did that. The GPAC sat down. The first thing that we pushed and proposed was currently under our general plan, our zoning. You can have you can have housing residences on tourist TRC. When he says TRC, it's tourist related commercial zone. We have that as a zone. As long as it's 50% or less, you can do it in every commercial in the TRC zone. We pushed and we passed, and it's recommended in this document, for all commercial and for all professional office zoning. We expanded it out so that, as an example, the Sampson unit that we all know is getting, could put second residential units on second or third floor, as high as they want to go. Anything that is zoned for offices down in the Cottage District could be second residential units on the second floor. So we've expanded and allowed residential mixed use in every single zone in the city. The city only owns, and I'm getting off base of your questions, but we've talked about, and it just peripherally, right before we had our last GPAC meeting, I sent an email out stating, hey, why don't we take the second story above every public parking lot in town and let a developer put apartments up there? Why wouldn't we do that? Why I would rather see infill development above, just like Santa Barbara, parking lots has 2 and 3 stories. We have 1 story of parking. We don't need second and third, but perhaps if we rezone the second floor or that to allow residences, a developer would come in, or a private-public partnership, and I don't know how many units we could do. We'd have to do that study. This was just talked about, and we're before the Planning Commission because we've run out of time. So we have not exhausted the remedies at all. There are people, though, that are against, obviously, putting housing on Lot 72, obviously putting houses down on Alisal Road, obviously over by the Mission development, obviously in front of the Triangle, in front of the windmill. That's it. That's all the land that's out there.
Right.
And the only land that the city owns is the parks. You want to take, we could go out to Sunny Fields, or we go to Hans Christian Andersen and try to develop that, or put residences there, or is it above parking lots, or what do we try to do? And to be honest, the second residential unit, the ADU laws that have kicked in, we don't have a definitive answer whether those numbers actually count and go toward our RENA numbers or not. If they did, if you've got 1,000 residences and everyone can have an ADU, you got 1,000 second residential units. I can't imagine that the state's going to say, certainly, how many houses you got, and I'm sure you can all fit a second residential unit on your lot. I don't know what the outcome's going to be. Last we heard from our attorneys, they're not 100% sure, or I think it was our developer. Anyway.
But with the mixed use, I'm hoping that we could take pressure off of parcels like, because I like to see it green. You see the deer,
Absolutely.
it's beautiful. It keeps the.
Since we're
Yeah, go ahead.
off the topic of Mission Oaks, maybe we could invite Joni back to participate.
So, this is Lori. For tonight's meeting, what would be helpful is for us first to go through the 5 sites that were identified and, determine what kind of direction we should give the consulting team to put into the public review draft that will be out hopefully by, the end of next week. Again, we have a 30-day comment period that we're shooting for, and we just want to verify the recommendation from the Planning Commission. And if there's any other sites that should be considered in this housing element, this would be a good time to, suggest those. The other part for today's meeting is if there are any policies within the document itself that you have comments on and would like to see amended or changed, that's the help that we need from your committee tonight, so that we can do one more comb through of this document before it goes out for the 30-day review period. So that's my suggestion for the evening.
Thank you, Lori. Based on what Aaron has said, I'm not sure that there are any other sites. I'm not aware of any other sites that could be considered. I like your idea of putting units above the parking. That had been talked about before.
It has been talked about before, and I don't know if it's practical or impractical, but obviously you've got a steep lot 3 that's awfully impractical to build on, as we've all concluded, or at least some people have concluded. I'm not speaking for all of us here, but I've concluded it. The lot 1 seems to work, the corner lot. There's a couple further down Alamo Pintada that seem to work, although we haven't heard from those neighbors. I don't know about down on Alisal Road. I don't know how the owner feels. I don't know how the neighbors there feel. I don't know if they've been made aware that this was coming up tonight, because they'd probably have a bunch of folks here also for that. Again, I'm not trying to shirk our responsibilities, but we are cart way before the horse. And I know we're trying to just get something out there so we have this 30-day comment period started so that we meet our needs. But, I'd rather, I just think it's silliness. I think we need to take a breath. I think we ought to have some more meetings in January. Here come the holidays. We have a new city council. All of us on Planning Commission are off as of December 31st. Whether we get it reappointed or whether we even want to serve, we don't know. And new city council, I don't even know if that election's been certified. We've got 2 new, or we don't even know who's on city council. So we're in this big flux time right now, which is really a difficult thing for me to sit down and conclude, with all due respect. I know what Lori's trying to do, and she's got her marching orders from the city council currently saying, look at these 5 sites. But I'm absolutely not prepared tonight to say, I'll pick number 1, I won't pick 3, I'll pick 4, but I won't pick. And I've been involved in this since day 1, since May, and I've done it before 7-8 years ago. So not that I'm the brightest, but I'm absolutely not prepared to go through all this. We got 15 letters tonight that we just are reading through tonight.
Any other comments? Are there any comments other than about the available lots on housing element? Just general comments about policies and what have you. I have one, just as a start. On the first page here, it talks about key terms. I'd like to see the addition of a definition of affordable housing. I've counted up like 10 or more areas in that one policy section that talks about affordable housing, but I couldn't find anywhere where affordable housing was defined. And probably within that would have to come a definition of low, moderate, et cetera.
I believe that's one of the comments I have already provided to the consulting team, that that particular section of the document needs to be embellished. And so I appreciate that comment.
If we're asking just general questions, not on just sites. I know, Lori, you had asked us to talk about sites, but, I've read through it, and obviously there's spelling errors, and Jack had pointed out there's some configurations that are a mess. Page 71, a question for me, and on page 71, it's in the second column over, and it's a general question, but it says, when it talks about affordable housing incentive programs, we talk about the planning period, during the planning period. And is it my understanding the planning period is from now until 8 years from now, till this gets certified, or is planning period every year? That's a question that, if we could define planning period for me, that would be helpful. The other question I had is on page 60, code enforcement. We list California Code Check. I don't think we contract with them anymore. It's a different company. And instead of putting a company in that we do contract with, just say that the code will be enforced by whatever, how internally or externally, or however we do it, just a more general.
That is a comment we provided because we currently contract out with someone locally,
With somebody else,
yeah.
right, not with them.
So that last sentence really isn't necessary.
And Lori, just back to that planning period, page 81 then talks about the planning period. So the one was just clarifying California Code Check. The other is this planning period. If we look at the top paragraph under quantified objectives by type, bottom of that paragraph talks about objectives for the 2023-2031 planning period. Is that the planning period we're talking about when we talk about it back on page 71. And if that's it, let's just consistently say 2023 to 2031, because that's our RENA number, then planning period, that's what I'm assuming, 116 units in the next 8 years once this gets adopted. Or I'm incorrect, I'm not sure.
No, Commissioner Peterson, yes, that is correct. That's a good comment. And I know the consultant's online, so we will relay that to them tomorrow also.
On that same page, I have a question on the last section there, rehabilitation and conservation objectives. Talks about program A, B, C, and D. What are program A, B, C, and D? I couldn't find them in here anywhere.
There's another document that's called the administrative document. It was document 11, and within that document are some action items and programs that this is referring to. And so what we can do is just make sure that there is consistency between this document and the administrative document, and we'll make that a reference based on your question that the actions that are being recommended are referenced in the administrative section of the general plan.
Okay.
Lori, if I could ask a question too, if we seriously wanted to look at above public parking lots, I mean, if we ask about what city-owned property there is, obviously there's a lot across the street from where we're sitting, which just got the I don't know, you're repaving it or we're doing something with the stormwater runoff. You've got the 4 public lots in town. You have Memorial Hall. Part of it's owned by the county, I understand, and part of it's owned by the city. I mean, have we looked at the? I know we haven't looked at those. So, what is the process to look at saying, gosh, can we do second story? Can we do housing above publicly owned property within the city as infill projects? And maybe our consultants can go, wow, that's 200 feet by 400 feet, and you can get 15 units above if somebody wanted to do that. I don't know what that process is, similar to what they did on identifying these 5 sites, I'm assuming?
Correct. I think your suggestion is a good one. As we're struggling to meet these numbers, any idea is very worthy of consideration. So just for the purposes of the audience and everyone, we're trying to come up with the numbers that will meet the state. Obviously, we're reporting to them, but each one of these sites, wherever we're locating them or considering potential development, will be analyzed in the environmental impact report for all of the same issues that on each one of those sites that were raised earlier for sites 3 and 4. And so that when we finally, a year from now, make that decision on the affordable housing sites, we have all of the information we need to make that informed decision. So I think in talking with the consultants, we will look at an opportunity to do something with the parking lots without eliminating the parking.
I think it's a great idea, and it'll be really interesting to hear what the consultant has to say about that. And I feel like if it is a lower income housing complex, or I feel like it'll mitigate some traffic issues because there are so many open positions in our town. Sorry? Workforce housing. That the new residents of those units could simply walk to work. And I think we all know that there are so many open positions and so much help that's needed in the town that there wouldn't be any real traffic issues if it was part of the TRC.
You have a question?
I didn't know the process, so excuse me.
Well, come forward, state your name again.
I'm sorry, Elaine Morris, and listening to your conversation now makes me want to ask a couple of things. One, the consulting firm that you're using, I understand they're not a local firm, and I'm just wondering how you came to that, to select this particular group. And once having selected them, what process did you use to identify potential sites? Because Mr. Peterson is speaking as though these are brand-new ideas that we're just talking about now, and they're wonderful ideas, and I'm wondering why they haven't been brought up before, given that we are paying an outside consulting company to help us identify sites. And so I would wonder exactly what process this company used. Was this a drive-through? Did they just look at site maps? What kind of information did they request from you? And what kind of interaction did you have with them in order to come up with the sites that you currently have, which I agree are far too limited and not nearly diverse enough? We're talking about a parking lot, we're talking about mixed use, certainly, and I thought some great items came up in your conversation, but it's still, I don't want to leave here and talk to my fellow homeowners and say, well, how did that happen, or what did they mean by that? So if you could expand a little bit on the background and how we got here, maybe help.
And again, I'm not an expert on it, other than Joni and I have sat on this GPAC. These folks have not had any conversations with the consultants at all, other than Joni Jameson and myself, because we're on GPAC, started back in May. And we were under a different management structure here at the city. And it was confusing, and it was a lot of spinning wheels, a lot of meetings, no meetings. The consultants are not at fault in this in any way, shape, or form. The city council went through an RFP and hired these consultants who are renowned consultants. They do this for a living. This is what they do. We're not going to find somebody, I would imagine, that lives in Solvang who would do this. They're wherever they're from. They have been down, they visited, they walked. We had a few public hearings in the parks and different places, and let's talk about it. But people take this the right way. Nobody cares until the very end. And that's just how it is. The Christmas party comes tomorrow and everybody panics to get their stuff. And that's how human nature is. We've had lots of meetings trying to get folks involved, and it'll happen. There are people tonight who aren't here thinking, well, shoot, they'll just wait for us to recommend to the city council, because that's all we're doing. And then they'll come to the city council meeting and say, I've never heard about this before, because they didn't want to come tonight, or they didn't want to come to the GPAC 4 meetings that we had before. And so, again, not being critical of anybody, but we've been doing this a while, and I'm not saying it's been a great process. In fact, it's been a really C- process, not at anyone's fault, certainly not consultants, certainly not, and it's not one individual or two or city council's fault. We've been through an election process, a recall. It has been a mess, and we've had a gun. So here, that's where we're at, and that's why my point is to say we just need to have a few more meetings with GPAC to identify sites. Those sites should be coming to us after those sites get vetted.
So those are still in the offing. The possibilities that you discussed, that you talked about, are still considerations, a parking lot, this or whatever.
Well, I'm saying as a planning director, planning commissioner, absolutely, that I'd like those considered. As Lansing Duncan said tonight, and he sits on GPAC, he hadn't heard about that this meeting was even going to take place. We were all a little bit shocked over that this was coming up to be for recommendations. So I would like to, from our standpoint, I'm not trying to kick it down the road. I'm just trying to say we need to look at some other sites and get some evaluations on these other sites.
Heard, and I am going to correct you because we are not asking for recommendations, just comments. And these will be given to the consultants, It's to provide them to the consultants for review for the housing element, to open it for public, the 30-day public comment period.
So if
But
you-
not to take any action on anything at this point.
And just to answer her question, also part of the question, she asked who Mintier Harnish, I think is the name of the, we had a joint meeting, I think, with the city council, and they introduced themselves. So I don't know if you want to bring that up on the city website or something so that people can refresh themselves with who they are. They
Yes.
did a good job of introduction, who they were and what they're doing and why they were hired.
That's a great suggestion, and I'll look into that. I think it was filmed, so I'll bring it back up. Oh, I also want to clarify that there's a General Plan Advisory Committee, or GPAC, as Commissioner Peterson has mentioned. Those meetings are not open to the public.
And just one last general comment, I promise I'll stop talking. We have 7 mandated elements in a general plan. I think the city has 8. We might have 9 because I know we picked the design element as an additional, and I think we picked up the economic development as a 9th element. This is the big element. I mean, some people feel very strongly about the design element, obviously, because of our architecture, our history, and our tourism, and those people care. The one that affects us the most is obviously the housing element, because that also drives the traffic element, which drives the safety element, which drives all the other elements. So I don't want to have people think we're short shifting these other elements, because they are vital, but a lot of what is driving a town is going to be the housing element, primarily because it's state mandated, and we have a deadline on us. Well, then the zoning element is part of this zone, because how do you do a housing element without doing the zoning element? But we can get this out there and then work on the zoning to rezone lots, or to rezone second stories, or to rezone and allow professional offices to have second story housing, or C2 to have housing. So it's tucked in a lot with the traffic and everything else. But so I'm not saying those are not important. Those have their own animal. They're out there also working toward an end. It's a big process.
If it's possible.
Yes.
Stephen Martin again, and I'm at 698 Hillside Drive, and what Commissioner Peterson was saying seems so logical about trying to take a look at the parking lots and build on them. And I would think that if you have a consultant who is an expert in this area of housing, that one of the things you want from that consultant is brainstorming and looking at different options. I didn't see that anywhere in the report. We have great ideas from GPAC and other people, citizens, and then the consultants over here recommending things which do not include all those good ideas. And I'm just wondering, how do we get the consultant to come in and say, look, what you guys should do is think about your parking lots that are owned by the city, and we would be glad to flesh that out and allow it to be part of our report, and recommend to the city council to take it seriously as something that could help meet the low-income housing needs.
Thank you.
I think that the best way to address both the planning commission and the public's comment is that we will be meeting with the consultants tomorrow or Wednesday, and go through how we can weave these other ideas into the document. Please know that this is, I'm going to call it the administrative public review document. There's many steps after this, but adding the parking structure idea into the element is definitely something that is innovative and I think should be acknowledged in the document, and especially because it does meet many other policies like infill development, vehicle miles traveled reduction, greenhouse gas reductions. You can go down the list of things that this option definitely is makes sense. Now, having said that, one of the challenges we have is there is a height limit that has been established on the city of 35 feet. So if we're going to look at an economically viable I'm going to call platform construction for, infill development, those particular projects might need to go higher. So as Commissioner Peterson mentioned, there's multiple elements and they need to be consistent with each other. And if there is a policy that the city TRC zone structures cannot go more than 35 feet, and then we have another policy of encouraging housing, and we may need that third or maybe fourth story in order to get the economic viability of a platform structure. We'll need to look at how we can make that happen based on the full analysis in the environmental review and with all of the other elements of the general plan. So please see that we have lots of challenges in front of us to make sure that everything is consistent with each other, and recognizing that if you squeeze the balloon one way, it pops out somewhere else, and we need to weave all of those items into this document. So thank you.
Really, really valid points for sure. But I would. It is really valid points, and I appreciate all those. I feel like thinking outside the box and being innovative, it's a great word that you used, is really appropriate for this situation, right? Maybe we can go subterranean for the parking. There's so many different things that we can do, and so we just need to really explore everything. And for the consultants just to pick out some of these open lots, that's kind of the easy play. So where else does that show up when we could use the TRC or subterranean or parking spaces? Where else does that show up in our special case? So I would challenge the consultants to find additional solutions for this challenge.
Just a note, I seem to recall that there was a discussion of housing above, and that would have required raising the height limit, I think, to 45 or 50 feet. And there were a series of public meetings where that was discussed, and the comments that came back from the public overwhelmingly said not to exceed 35 feet. So that just in itself would limit what they could consider if they took that into account. Lansing, you have?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to actually respond to Commissioner Rodriguez's point regarding mixed use and give you a little bit more information on that. And I'm totally supportive of mixed use, but this speaks to the complexity of the problem. Yes, when the Mercantile project was approved, it was approved with 8 apartments that are now above CVS. It is not actually above New Frontiers. They're above CVS. And the idea was that that would contribute to both the diversity and the affordability of the housing in Solvang. But I was recently informed that 5 of those are Airbnbs. And that's something I hear all the time from community members, that we're losing affordable housing here by the competition for our housing that is occurring because of Airbnbs.
Well, and that just to clarify, and Lansing knows this, I mean, it's a good point he's making. It's illegal to have an Airbnb outside of the TRC. So we don't necessarily, we're not allowing it, they're just doing it, and the city is not enforcing it. And again, not to make light of it, but we don't have to enforce it. We can use those units still for our RHNA numbers, but we should still be enforcing the no Airbnb or the vacation rentals outside of the TRC. I would also take issue, Jack, a little bit. 35 feet's not a bad height. I mean, I look at the Peterson, the Lansby, which we built, and that's 35 feet, and we've got, first and a second. We have some underground parking, and then we have high roofs, but they're fake roofs because they're flat, but you don't notice. I mean, there's maybe it has to go to 42 or 38, or I would agree with you, but we could probably come up with and vote on an exception on these 4 public lots that we have, or the 5, if you wanted to look at Memorial Hall. I don't know if we could even do that, but that maybe they could be a little bit higher to accommodate, because it's an economic issue, just like the folks pointed out on their Lot 3 on Alamo Pintado. Lancey and I had this conversation. You can do anything with money. I mean, you could build on Lot 3. You could build on Alamo Pintado. You dropped $20 million. You could put viaducts in, and you could underwater. You could do it. You would never be able to afford to have lower moderate housing on it. So then it begs the question. So I would agree, Jack, if you only let them go up a little bit, it's never going to happen, and it's a false premise. So I'm with looking at it, though. And if it's a little bit higher, I don't think anybody would care.
And times change too, so people, may want to revisit the fact that put a second, third story, especially maybe in the TRC. If you look at Denmark itself, this is a Danish village. They have 3 and 4 stories. It's density. All the European villages are clustered. It's small, and they don't go out; they go up.
So maybe it's up to us, the commission, the city council, the city as a whole, to inform people of why it might be a good thing to do something like that, instead of the opposite. Well, everybody says not greater than 35 foot, therefore that's the rule. And I have just a couple other things that I'd like to recommend that they look at, not only in the housing element, but throughout. And that's water and energy. In the update, I think it says that we've got adequate water for everything that's being proposed. Well, that was my question. Where did that come from? Right. And is that really correct? And
We don't have water for what we have now,
yeah.
so that's ridiculous. I'm sorry.
And, I think we need to face the reality with water that droughts aren't going to go away. And that, one of these years we're going to get a torrential downpour and the lake's going to fill up again. And but that doesn't mean we should go away from conserving. And as far as energy is concerned, everything you read, everything's going electric. What are we doing to increase our electrical infrastructure in the city? What are we requiring on new development or redevelopment of existing buildings with energy efficiency?
So in response to those 2 comments, the facilities section is being reviewed right now by both Public Works and the Utilities Division to, I think, provide some additional information in regards to how the portfolio of water that is available to the city of Solvang, and what the opportunities are for additional water sources. So I think you'll see additional information in that particular section of the document. In regards to energy, the city, as required by state law, allows for anyone to put solar on their roofs. One of the things that we are working through is putting solar on those roofs within the TRC zone. That is something that could unfortunately change the look of some of the buildings in Solvang. So although we cannot deny solar on any roof, we are looking at the design element and to make sure that we at least provide some direction as to how the solar should be on the roofs in the TRC zone. So we are looking at every opportunity to be sustainable within the city as part of this effort, and again, follow state law.
Yeah, but I was thinking beyond that, in putting in conduit that can handle high wattage for charging stations, that sort of thing. I realize that the state already says we have to allow solar on roofs and what have you, and we've done that. But I don't see in this general plan any, how to put it, energy plan for where we expect to be in 2031.
So
Just
normally,
because, you know, happenstance, what's gonna happen is gonna happen, there's no plan in there.
yeah, the utility companies are private companies. The city works with them on, installation of infrastructure. We are working, we are part of the collaborative for broadband installation. And one of the policies tied to broadband is that, and the broadband will be installed throughout, the major corridors of every city within the state of California as we can possibly get. But one of the policies is that you trench once. So there is a collaborative between PG&E, the cable companies, broadband. If there's any upgrades that are going to happen within a particular area, particularly along 246, any state highway, that's one of the big efforts going on right now, that any trenching that does happen would happen once. And any other upgrades to infrastructure would happen at that time.
So does that mean that we would just automatically put in additional conduits? Say PG&E digs a trench to put in a new electrical line. Would we automatically require that conduit for broadband be put in at the same time? Or,
I think they're already working on that. I was watching a city council meeting where that was being considered. Right?
you know, I'm saying something like that should be in our plan.
We can definitely add that to, again, particularly with broadband, that's such a new item that's really driving this discussion. And I think that is definitely something we can add to the infrastructure, the public infrastructure policy document, that the coordination between the city, the state, and the utilities need to be looking at upgrading infrastructure throughout the city.
Right, that's exactly what I was looking for. That was all I had. Does anybody else have any?
I just have a comment. It may not be very popular. I think over the last 6 or so years, that the City Council, the Planning Commission, and the Design Review Committee have done the best that they could do with what they had to work with. We were not necessarily given the best information. And I'm not talking about the people that are here now. I think there were times when we were just left out there and they wrote down what they wanted to write down, and they really didn't listen to us as a group of people. And I think now we're playing catch up, and it's going to take us a while to get caught back up. Just my opinion, having done this for a long time.
I have one comment. It's nice to see all the people out. I mean,
Yes,
come out more
thanks
often
for
when
coming.
it doesn't, I mean, this affects you guys directly because they were talking about a site around your house. But it'd be nice to see. Sometimes this chamber is completely empty when we're having a task. And I remember I pushed it was the food truck or something. I was like, there's nobody here. I don't know if a restaurant haven't heard about it or something. Maybe they want to figure something out. So we pushed it out one time, and that was kiboshed, of course, but it's nice to see people out here, and I appreciate you guys' comments.
I'll second that. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you for listening.
Yeah, thank you for
Yeah,
listening.
thank you for the discussion. It was very good.
So, to staff, do you feel you have the information you were looking for from this?
Yeah,
Or more information than you wanted?
Lori may jump in. No, never. Lori may jump in, but I think so. We have a lot to take back to the consultants, and I think also to continue having the conversation about what the timeline looks like, to Aaron's comments. So, yes.
To the point of comments from the public, these folks came tonight because Lansing Duncan lives up there and he got the word out. There are people in Alisal Glen that didn't know that there was 2 sites right there at the bottom of that hill that's owned by the Jackson family who may want
And the
low
city.
income.
And the city.
Yeah, and the city owns part of the top, but it's mostly there. And those folks might be happy, or they might be very unhappy also. And I know it's difficult to get the word out for people to come to these meetings, but boy, it's vitally important as people can see. So I don't know if we need to, when we're picking, when we have these 5 sites, that we give notice within 300 feet like we would if there was a developer trying to develop at the bottom of Alisal Hill, or on Lot 1, or on 3. Or on 4 or 5, that the neighbors would get notice, so they would know I'm within 300 feet. I got notice because Don Brad is asking to do a lot split of his professional office at the top of my hill. I don't care, zone for it, but I got notice in the mail from the city, and this is a lot bigger than Don Brad remodeling an office building, is my point. And again, no criticism, but just when it's rezoning these big lots and it's only limited, general notice doesn't always work. It
Yeah.
works when people really know and they come.
I do appreciate the feedback, and I'm always interested in continuous improvement. So I appreciate that, and we'll definitely work on better noticing, getting emails prior to the Saturday before, updating the website, and then also sending out notices to folks.
Can I just get some clarification, please, on the RENA numbers? I feel like this is going to be a moving target, right? So how often are those RENA numbers updated, and how often are they published?
So this is an effort that's gone on for the last year almost. They start with the census. That was the first part of it, just to get a better sense of what was happening. But the effort does happen every 8 years. There was about a year with representatives of each one of the cities, the county, SBCAG, going through and that's Association of Governments, going through how to allocate numbers that came down from the state. The state of California assigned 25,000 units to Santa Barbara County this last time. And you can imagine that was substantially more than they've ever done before in previous housing elements. This is the 6th cycle. And so for a year, the cities and the county, staff looked at how to allocate those 25,000 units. 14,000 of those units were allocated to the South Coast. So Goleta, Santa Barbara, Carpinteria, the county, they're all dealing with the same number. And so, and Solvang ended up being assigned 194 units.
191.
You're on the screen.
And then there's also a state law, Lori, correct, that we have to account for 20% over that as well, right?
Yes, we're working with the consultant on making sure we have a buffer.
Thank you, Lori.
Okay, any other planning commissioner comments? None? Any staff comments?
So we will be making this same presentation to the city council next week. There is a follow-up GPAC meeting, again, talking about other elements, but we will work with the consultants on these ideas that have been brought up and see how we can address them in the housing element. The goal is to get a document out for the 30-day public review period through the end of December and into January, so that when the new city council is up and running, they can review what has come out from the public and what changes have been made through responding to those comments, written and public. At their February 13th meeting is how we see the schedule. So we can file a document with the state on February 15th. And again, realizing that this is a filing draft and we still have environmental review and all of the other steps, but we're trying to at least have a good faith effort of responding back to the state.
So because it's a draft, and it sounds like it's going to be a rough draft, there's nothing to preclude us from making changes to that draft as we go to the final document. Is that correct? Or are we going to be held to certain things in there?
No, that is correct. And particularly because of the environmental review analysis, both on, traffic, archaeology, all of the things that we've discussed tonight will drive how the ultimate build out of those units, potential units, would be. The one thing that state wants to make sure is that what's being proposed by a jurisdiction is viable, that we're not just trying to slip something under, but actually make sure that they are feasible projects. And that's why the parking lot idea is so important, because that's a costly development, but it can happen. And just as Commissioner Peterson said, it will take some money to do podium development, but it's being done everywhere. So it's something that I think we need to provide that information and analysis in the environmental document to report to the state that it is a viable option.
Okay, thank you.
I-
Anything else from staff?
Just, I wanted to thank you all for your time and care and dedication in serving on the Planning Commission. If you're interested in serving again, I believe Anna Marie sent something out regarding an electronic application that you can fill out to express your interest for consideration. And there will be, I know of at least 2 projects that we'll have ready to go for the February meeting.
Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Can you remind us just on, I can't really remember, how do we get selected on the plan? I know we put an application in. Let's say there's 12 people that apply.
Each of the city council members get to select one person, appoint one person to the planning commission, and I believe the DRC as well.
Sorry, then voted on by the full city council.
Right.
So just because somebody would appoint me, doesn't mean I would get 3 votes. And therefore, you go to a different appointment, right? So
Right.
people are tending to think that if I get appointed, I'm on, but it's a vote of city council.
Yeah, the whole council has to vote on it, so you need at least 3 votes.
Correct.
And I believe that is happening on Monday, January 23rd.
Because we'll
That
have
meeting.
the certified election, we'll have the appointment of our mayor's position on city council filled by city council by then also.
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay. Meeting adjourned at 7:45.
When's your next class?